Hello and welcome to this episode of the Agency Show by Clientjoy. I'm Yash, co-founder and chief executive at Clientjoy. At Clientjoy, we help agencies manage their leads, proposals, contracts, projects, support ticketing, invoicing, and payments, the whole nine yards. The Agency Show is a podcast where we invite agency experts and owners who make 7+ figures a year to talk about their problems across their growth, fulfillment, and revenues. And we talk about their journey of solving these problems. If you are an agency owner, this show is for you, so do not forget to hit the subscribe button. Joining us today is Stephen, Chief Revenue Officer at Reliable Networks and a personal coach. He has been head of sales at a 200+ team member IT services firm and helps businesses grow through people, process, and technology. Today, we're going to be talking about how agencies can optimize their lead conversion, primarily having a conversation centered around steps and processes to be built around the conversion funnel, basic principles to keep in mind, to optimize your conversions, how to write follow-ups, tools that could help at different stages, so on and so forth. Hey, Stephen, thank you for joining us today. Let's start with a little about you.
Thanks very much, Yash. So I've spent about 20 years in the tech industry. I've sat both sides of the fence. So I've sat the client side, understanding the pains of outsourcing to agencies and to suppliers. And I've sat the supplier side as well. And as you rightly said, I also do some coaching around sales, marketing, and business growth as well. So that's me. I'm a techie by trade. A lot of people tend to know that. So I've got a good understanding of technology. And it's sometimes I've trained myself to try and talk about that last. A lot of people get excited about technology, but I tend to like, as you said, the people, the process, and then the technology. So really getting under the hood of understanding the problem, which, as we've spoken before this podcast, Clientjoy helps solve some of those problems in the form of a CRM. So really excited to be here. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you for that introduction. And so let's start right off the bat, right? So one of the things that I'd love to understand, one of the challenges that we also faced when we were starting out our own IT agency was primarily like, how do you go about designing a conversion funnel or a sales funnel, right? So what are the things that you keep in mind when you're designing a conversion funnel for an IT agency? And this is coming in from the perspective that if you're selling a product, let's say if I'm selling AirPods or if I'm selling any product that exists out there in the market, a watch or whatever the case may be, I have a product that is tangible in nature, and so I can talk about its benefits and I can talk about its features, and I could go to the ideal client persona that I have, and I can ask for the referrals and stuff like that. But when I'm offering services of any sort, whether it is tech agency or a design agency or an event management company or consulting practice, it's fairly subjective in nature, right? So you won't know the benefits until you've kind of experienced it or worked with at one point of time. So how do you, like, what's the difference and how do you go about building a sales or a conversion funnel for an agency?
So that's a good question. Sales, service and product. Service is very difficult because it's something that you experience. So exactly, you've hit the nail on the head. When someone has a problem, you can talk to them about a product that will fix the problem. It's tangible. But a service, how do you demonstrate your credibility over somebody else? And I think there's 2 points to this problem. One is the process that supports optimizing that conversion. So really qualifying and having something that's almost rinse and repeatable. So it's second nature in terms of getting under the hood, making sure you've understood the prospect's problems, understood their challenges, their objectives, almost like a qualification framework. But having something to support you through that process means that you don't miss any important steps, because ultimately when you're presenting your solution, if you can't do a proof of concept or a demo, you really need to be demonstrating that you're aligned to solving what they're here to solve. And that's part of the problem. I think the second part is having a system that supports that, because a lot of people I've worked with on the smaller scale, people tend to work off of a spreadsheet or a notepad or a notebook, and that can be challenging because you don't have the process that supports it and you don't have the mechanism to support it. And when you're growing a business as a salesperson, you're going to be in front of more than one prospect, so you need to keep track of all of them, and you need to make sure that when you're in front of them, you're focused on them. So I think for me, those are the two problems. CRM fixes part of that problem. The system fixes part of that problem, but the system is only ever as good as the person that's using it. So you do have to be aware of, how do I fit my sales process into what I'm selling? Because as you said, selling product and selling services are typically harder, longer sales cycle. Quite often there's an existing service provider, be that another marketing agency, be it another tech agency. And that's hard because you're having to come in and displace an incumbent. So I think there's not magic though, and it's not that people will tell you as a dark art, but there is a bit of science to it and there is a bit of fact to it. So I think understanding that process and really understanding how you're going to qualify and take people through each sales stage from the top of the funnel, at the very top, all the way down to the bottom, where they really understand, I'm confident that you can fix my problem, your company are going to be there, and your product or service are going to support it as well.
Yeah, and so one of the other challenges, like apart from the fact that you're going to have to displace an incumbent, there's going to be either a direct service company that's already in place, or probably an indirect one which is kind of doing this requirement, or fulfilling this requirement as an ancillary service until the client realizes that they need a full-time service provider for something like this. The other challenge apart from that is also that when you're talking to a prospect, they are talking to at least 4 or 5 other similar service provider, right? So you've also got to stand out, and you've also got to display how you are better, and that better can come from a lot of different places, but you've also got to do that. And so this kind of brings me to my next question, which is where I wanted to understand a little bit around, what are the typical stages in a sales or a conversion funnel that you've seen in your experience? For, let's take an example of a marketing agency or a tech agency that's eyeing for a project with a client, let's say for performance marketing, right? And they're approaching a client that has a budget of, let's say, $20,000 every month for performance marketing. What are the typical steps that are involved in a conversion or a sales funnel in such a sort of a setup?
Good question. I think a lot of the stages are fairly similar. Different people will call them different things. I think the first stage, as a salesperson, I'm qualifying, but in reality, the best way to approach that, the first stage, is really, for me, is discovery. Massive amounts of discovery around what is it they're doing, what is it they're trying to achieve. I think out of that, you will naturally qualify whether or not a customer or a prospect is a good fit based upon lots of different things. Sometimes, yes, budget is something that you're concerned about, but a lot of people make the mistake of misqualifying. So people don't necessarily have the budget today, but they can certainly create a budget if they believe your service is better than what's out in the market, because quite often your unique selling point means that you're not comparing apples for apples, and so your service will inherently be different to that of the competitors that they're talking to. So those initial stages, really the discovery stage for me, is really understanding your problem, your challenge, and getting under the hood of, first of all, can I solve your problem? There's no point in us continuing if really I can't solve your problem, and it's not in my wheelhouse. It's quite often better to qualify you out, so to speak, than to spend all that amount of time, because you're going to go away quite upset at the end of it when I go, well, look, Yash, it's been great. We spent a few weeks or months together, but I can't help you. You'll be like, well, why did you take me on that journey? Right? I've learned some great stuff, but you haven't helped. And then secondly, there's really, I think there's a collaboration to putting something together. If your service is off the shelf and it's a managed service, sometimes it is just what it is, right? It's a managed service off the shelf. But having sold managed services for 20 years, I think they do differ. We call them managed services in marketing and tech, but we do make exceptions, and we do make variations to that service based upon client need. And so you have to collaborate with the prospect to really marry the desire, the challenge to what you're going to be delivering.
Mm-hmm.
And all of this happens before you even get to, can I give you a proposal? Can I walk you through a demo? Sometimes, if you're a SaaS company, you're going to be demonstrating quite quickly, because depending on where they come in, they've done their research already. They've read your white paper. They've read your blog. They know a bit about you. But certainly in agencies, that's a lot harder. It's a lot more about the person and the solution.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the initial stages that I see at the very beginning before you get to that kind of proposal. Sometimes I have a stage called scoping. For me, I articulate that scoping stage to, how am I solutioning my product or service to your requirements? In a tech world, that would be a solution architect. In a marketing agency, that's probably an account director or technical marketer that's going to be kind of making sure that wrap is what you're looking for. But they are different. But again, that goes back to what I said before. Having a system that supports that means you can standardize that service. So, we call it discovery design. Some people will call that qualifying and solutioning, but they're ultimately the same things happen. It's just a different set of naming convention. But the process most of the time is similar. You might break it down a bit more if you're selling something complex. You might have 3 or 4 stages. But again, it comes down to simplifying. I think some people try to oversimplify and they go down a rabbit hole of, I've got 10 stages, I have to complete them all, and it doesn't feel natural. And the prospect's going to feel alienated because they're going to feel, why have I got to go through all of this? It needs to feel natural. It needs to feel like you do this day in and day out, because your credibility needs to be established with them. I don't know if that answers your question, but I think that's quite important for anybody that's typically sales being new or being something that exists that might be not working at optimal speed. That's quite often an area that's broken, is the process and the underlying technology of it.
Yeah, and this does, and this kind of also takes me on a slight tangent, which is one of the things that I've realized, and this is an arguable sort of an opinion, right? It's not a first principle; it's an arguable opinion. But I believe that in a services company specifically, the processes are to be written to support the people, and people are not supposed to support the process. So as an example, if you have a process, the goal of that process is to help the people, right? And so at any point of time, the people who are involved in that process should be able to have some amount of maneuverability if it is not feeling natural to follow those steps in the process, right? It should not be the other way around, where you've written a process and then people are expected to support the process and follow it no matter what, right? And processes are typically a living and breathing set of documents that you can always change, update, and make them and get them to evolve, right? So that's something that you could also do. And so coming to the conversion optimization, so one of the challenges that I've also personally faced, and I'm sure a lot of other agency owners face, is that the idea of conversion optimization is that if I have, let's say, 10 leads or 10 prospects in a particular stage, and if I'm able to, so as on today, if I'm able to bring in 2 people to the next stage, and then if at some point of time, if I'm able to bring in 3 people, then I've optimized my conversions. However, again, and an arguable question, which I'd love you put your thoughts on, is that my personal idea of sales is essentially having an ICP, and then just talking to prospects and saying fit or not fit, right? So it's not necessarily to always convert everything that you have in your previous stage and bring them to the next stage. You always want to, at every point of time, you always want to see what fits and what doesn't fit. Only and only if it fits do you bring to the next stage. And then slowly and gradually what you do is you go to the previous steps, and then whatever things that you're doing to bring in the prospects to those steps, you try and make those prospects that are coming in through those steps be more relevant. So there are more fits rather than not fits as in when you grow. But So what are your thoughts on that? I'm sure this is a very confusing question that I've asked, but
No, I think so. In my world, I relate this back to the MQL to SQL problem. So marketing
hmm.
qualified leads, sales qualifying leads,
Hmm.
and so you hit I want on a point there, Yash, where I want to move people through my sales
Yeah.
pipeline from the marketing funnel quickly and efficiently. And there's
Hmm.
so 2 points you raised. One, absolutely, the process should support the people. The people shouldn't support the process.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people sometimes over-engineer their processes,
Yeah.
and some people just don't have enough process,
Yeah.
and it's striking a happy balance. I think the second point to that is you're absolutely right. You want to be bringing the right types of prospects into your funnel. So
Hmm.
you want to be optimizing on the outer edge, because what that would tell me is if my conversion rate from marketing qualified leads into sales qualified leads is very, very low, I've
Hmm.
got a fundamental front end problem, which is
Yeah.
probably my messaging, my content, and the people that I'm going and reaching out to are not my ideal customer profile. They're not my target
Yeah.
buyer persona. And
Yeah.
so you want to be optimizing the front end so that you're filling your funnel, so to speak, with quality and quantity. And that's quite a hard trick to do, because
Yeah.
quality over quantity, do I want one really quality lead, or do I want 100 that I just don't know,
Yeah.
is sometimes a problem. And you're right, you need to be optimizing the stages, and you want to be optimizing the people that are coming through, because as you qualify them, if they're not a good fit, there is that question to sit down and go, why weren't they a good fit? If I've got 10
Yeah.
people, it's a bit like when we lose deals, we have a loss review. The same as you should be reviewing
Hmm.
your pipeline. You should be
Yeah.
reviewing your conversion rates at each stage to say, why are these people dropping off? Is
Yeah.
it because they have a problem that we're not aligned to, or they're
Hmm.
not a good fit, or we're talking to the wrong people? If everybody's dropping off for argument's sake that because they don't have budget, it tells me that we're probably bringing the wrong person into the pipeline, or we're not getting past the person that doesn't have the budget to the budget holder or the stakeholder in their business.
Yeah.
And so it's a dark art in that respect. I said at the beginning there isn't a dark art, but I think
Yeah.
there isn't a magic bullet. There's no magic wand to wave and fix that solution in any agency,
Correct.
because of what you do, and your process is slightly unique to you. And I think you're absolutely right. I think everything you've said, I see that a lot, and I
Yeah.
see that from small businesses to very large businesses, because the problem just gets bigger. In a larger company, I have
Yeah.
more salespeople, I have a bigger marketing team, and so
Yeah.
I've got a bigger problem with the number
Yeah.
that's coming in. So sometimes
Yeah.
that's a lot harder to fix in a bigger organization.
Hmm.
So to anybody listening to this, I think if you're a lot smaller, you're in a better position, because you can fix this a
Yeah.
lot more with a lot more agility and a lot
Yeah.
quicker than you can someone that's been doing it for 10 years and has over-engineered processes, broken systems, and a
Yeah.
pipeline of, if I've only got 100 people coming into my pipeline and you've got 10,000, you can't fix 10,000
Yeah.
very quickly.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. I've seen that. Before we started our agency, I used to work in an organization that employed 55,000 people, and so it was not an agency, the place where I was at a job, but it was 55,000 people, and so every small little thing would take months and months of time. But then when we started our agency, we were a two people team. Right? It was me and my co-founder, and so it was. Almost every decision was just one cup of tea away. So so that's something that's super helpful, and you're able to maneuver fairly quickly. You're able to change things about your agency or your freelancing practice fairly quickly as well. I'll diverge from the conversion optimization for a bit, and this is fairly well established that fortune lies in follow-ups, and you want to follow up with your leads. A lot of times what might happen is that there's a lot of engagement in the discovery stage. There are a couple of people involved, and you are having really good quality conversation with your prospects. And then at some point of time, for whatever reason, the conversation trail, it just trails off, right? So you don't hear back with the same frequency. You're not able to get on calls, and so you'd want to follow up with them. Another thing that I've also heard is that over about 65-70% of deals close between the 9th and the 13th follow-up, right? And so what I want to understand from you is how, when I sit to write follow-ups, I myself feel very irritated, right? That, hey, I should not be writing this. There's got to be a better way. So how would you write follow-ups for a conversation that's trailed off? How would you go about it?
It's a good question. Follow-ups are a big problem. And so follow-ups from initial point of contact, in that follow-up, it is really the quickest person, because that person is contacting 5 companies or 6 companies for information. So in that respect, it's the speed of the follow-up and the quality of what you provide to the question that's being asked. But you're absolutely right. A lot of salespeople, or a lot of people, I think I've been guilty of this. Everybody is guilty of it, because we have so many things going on in our busy day. And if you're a salesperson, what's even harder is you're chasing the money that's closest to you at the time. And so it's very hard. It's not like anybody's doing it on purpose, but it's very hard because you're going, well, I'm now speaking to Bob. Bob's really engaged, and there's a potential opportunity here. But I've been speaking to Sally. The conversation's died off. It's easy as a human to go, well, that's okay. I can park. I've got a good relationship with Sally. I can come back to Sally next week. However, if Sally is talking to somebody else, like your counterpart in a competitor, it doesn't matter how strong your relationship is. Somebody else is keeping the conversation going. And it's a hard balance, because we don't want to feel at that stage like the salesperson being pushy, because we've established a relationship. But we need to keep the credibility. A lot of people make a mistake of trying to automate that stage. I think there's a good argument and an argument for, should I be automating leads? But when your credibility and you're building a relationship, it's very personal, and I think people don't like that level of automation. Email is good. It depends on the person. Email is good. LinkedIn is good to keep relationships going. It really, for me, it's very omni-channel, because everybody's different. How do I respond to information? Do I read it? Do I visualize it? Do I listen to it? The same as, how do I respond, and how do your colleagues respond to communication? That prospect might prefer a phone call. So again, for me, it's about having a system that keeps you on track with the follow-ups. And you need to be on top of setting yourself those tasks of, I need to check in with Sally this week. If that's just I drop an email, I haven't had a response. If I haven't had a response, I should be engaging on where Sally lives, which is either LinkedIn or another Twitter, or or on telephone, just pick up the phone and say, hi, how's it going? Where are we at? Just keeping that relationship, because it's a lot harder to come back when you haven't heard, because very quickly 1 week turns into 2 weeks, turns into a month. And it's very hard in 2 months' time to pick up and go, oh, hi, how are you? Because there's so awkward. Much that is the time that's lapsed. It's very awkward. It's very awkward, and it's not genuine. It's not a genuine relationship at that point. So I think it's keeping you accountable, and a system will keep you accountable. A technology will keep you accountable if you implement that correctly. And like you say, process needs to support people, and that is the system that you're using should support you in understanding who you should be talking to close, but also who you should be talking to keep nurturing relationships. Because we talk about nurturing in marketing, but as a salesperson, as somebody that's got contacts, I need to nurture those people myself. So
I heard this somewhere, and let me know what you think about this, is that feel free to automate everything until you had first conversation with a prospect, right? If you,
Absolutely.
as soon as you get on a call with them, or you meet with them, or they respond to your email, or they respond to your message, or text message, or whatever, once they've responded, then the automation can only happen internally within your organization, right? So you can run automations to set reminders and stuff like that for yourself, but an automated outreach after someone's responded is a no-no, right? So you always have a person doing outreach or whatever the case may be. And the other thing that I also I've also kind of learned is that you want to, whenever you're following up, you want that follow-up to be fresh. And so before you write a follow-up, you just want to check their socials, right, in terms of what's been happening, right? So just check out what they've posted about recently, and if that's something that you care about as a salesperson, or as an individual also, just feel free to mention that in your email, right? Check out what the latest tweet has been, and so on and so forth. And that's also super helpful. It kind of makes the prospect feel, and rightfully so, it makes the prospect feel that you're genuinely paying attention to who they are, what they are doing, and where they are.
Well, I think you raise a good point. There's an old saying: "People buy from people."
Yeah.
Right. So, there's a good ideology around. I can trust your product. I can trust your service. I can have absolute confidence that your product or service is going to fix my problem.
Mm-hmm.
But if I don't have confidence that your company is going to be there to support me, that's a problem. And if I don't have confidence that you are the person that can support me and you're going to be there for me after the sale, or you're genuinely interested in me. So those three levels of confidence, I think, are really important. And you hit the nail on the head again, where it needs to be personal. If you're going to provide value to me, you can look at my LinkedIn and you could go, "Oh, I saw you asked a question on, have you seen this? It's not even my ebook, but this ebook is a really good ebook that might fix your problem." That provides me with value, but it's not automated. It's personal. The same as I get it a lot. I get sold to a lot. And one of the things I get that automated outreach of, "Hi, Steve, I thought you might be interested in this blog post we published." And the blog post is on, nothing to do with me. And I'm like, "You're selling me a service for sales and you've sent me a blog post on optimizing invoicing time." I'm like, yeah, okay, that's great, but it's not relevant to me. So pick out those personal points, because it shows that you care, and it shows that you want the relationship, and that's really, really important and very powerful. It can be a lot harder in more complex sales where you've got maybe 4 or 5 decision makers, but when you're in that mid-market and that enterprise space, you'll probably be quite experienced in kind of keeping those relationships open with sort of multiple stakeholders. But you're right. Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. You should be spending the time to understand, what have I posted recently, or what am I interested in, or what's going on with my business. They may not post, but their business may have posted that they've won an award, or or somebody else has done something, and it just shows that you're interested. And that can sometimes be the biggest tipping point. If there's you and a competitor and both your products and companies are great, it's going to come down to you. Do I like you? Do I think you've got my best interests at heart? Are you really interested in me? I don't know.
No, absolutely. This is so true. And I've seen decisions being changed because everything is the same, and they just for some reason that they cannot explain internally, the client cannot or prospect cannot explain internally, they just like that person, right? And is a nice person, talks about them, takes interest in them, and that's one of the reasons why they want to continue working with that service provider, or offer them new business as well. And so this brings us to the last part of this conversation, where I'll ask you 2 quick questions, right? So the first one is, what are some of the tools that you would recommend? If you can give some categories and some names, but what are some of the tools that you recommend that an agency could use to optimize their conversion funnel? And once we're done with that, I'll ask you the last question as well.
Okay, so I think on the lead gen side, I think absolutely you want a tool that can automate messaging at scale to prospects, to people that you don't know, and it really depends on your sales process. If you have SDRs sitting at a desk that are doing cold calling, you need a tool that supports them and doesn't replace them.
Yeah.
So LinkedIn and email outreach, there's quite a few out there that I can sort of name. You've got products like Plenty, you've got products like Outplay, Sales Rocks. All of those are really good tools, but they again, they're not the magic, wand. They fit into and support you, and that's your outreach. Out of any of them, some of these tools have A/B testing and some don't. Regardless of that, you need to be the person that's checking what messaging is working, what campaign is working, and why isn't, what's getting the most engagement, what's getting the most clicks. Understanding your one tool, understanding your target buyer profile. Yeah, absolutely. There's tons of tools out there, but you can do it on a piece of paper. If you don't know who your ideal customer is from a business perspective and who your target buyer is, everything you do is going to fail, or it's going to be a lot harder rather than necessarily failing. A really good CRM, and CRM can be anything from one person and their dog with a spreadsheet all the way up to a global SaaS product. Shameless plug, I use Clientjoy myself. So, and that's how we're talking. I have experience, as you know, we've spoken with the likes of Salesforce, HubSpot, and the bigger ones. They have their place, but for me, I would suggest to anybody, spend the time to understand the actual platform. You don't want something that's trying to do everything. You want something that can integrate with the best tools on the market. Some of these larger ones try to be everything, and then that gets very expensive. You need someone to manage it all the time. And as you said before, you need process and tools that support people. I don't want to hire a CRM admin, right? Because why am I hiring someone to administer my CRM when my CRM should be self-administrating? And that's the whole point of a CRM. And then I think it's the follow-ups. So tools, I think for me, there are internal tools. So really nailing out your sales process, your sales stages, your marketing to sales process, and that there are tools on the market, but I think they're tools that you develop as an agency. You develop those internally to really understand what's going, because you can then pick a CRM and you can make that CRM fit your process, or you fit your process to the CRM, rather than trying to find all of these tools that are out there. And then from a marketing perspective, any tool that can help automate messaging. And some CRMs do this really well. I know I've been playing around with some of the stuff that you guys have got coming out. And that's really good. It's good to see a level of automation, like you say, to the point that we have that contact. And then the CRM just helps me keep on top of that. And that's the thing I really like. So yeah.
Awesome. And so every tool or platform that Stephen mentioned, along with his LinkedIn profile, and he's graciously agreed to share his email ID as well, are going to be, so wherever you are watching this or listening to this on LinkedIn or Spotify or Google Podcasts or Apple Podcasts or wherever it is, in the description box you will see all the links to all the tools that Stephen mentioned, and his LinkedIn profile and his email ID. And so if you want to reach out and have, so this was primarily a very generic conversation, right? I brought up some of the challenges that we faced, and I've seen a lot of other agencies face, but every agency faces a unique challenge. And so if you have a very specific issue that you would want to talk about, you'd want to reach out to him, then his contact credentials are also going to be there in the description box, and do consider reaching out to him and asking him all the questions that you have. That would be super helpful as well. With that, Stephen, I'd love to thank you for appearing on the podcast. Thank you for taking out the time, sharing all of these valuable insights, and this has been brilliant and meaningful. And so thank you once again.
No, thank you very much for having me. It's been really good having a conversation with you, Ash. It's refreshing also to see someone that takes that understanding of the challenges that we all face. So no, thank you very much.
Awesome.
Cheers.
Yeah. Bye-bye.